Good afternoon. I'm Ross Thurston. I'm the president of Livestock Water Recycling, and I'm here to welcome you to the World Dairy Expo and the first virtual tour of the show. I have the privilege of introducing Jim Ostrom today of Milk Source, and he's going to present on the Milk Source's new dairy in Hudson, Michigan, which I've been to. It's a beautiful place. A renovated dairy where I think he's left one wall of the original construction. So it's very nice, and I think you're in for a real treat today. At Livestock Water Recycling, we have a real passion for the environment, and our belief is that when we looked at environmental markets, the farmers are the original environmentalists and conservationists. And Milk Source certainly puts sustainability as a foundation of everything that they do. And the new Hudson Dairy is a real example of cow care, nutrient management, and water conservation. So we're very excited about that. The dairy launched in June of this year. It's the fifth large dairy that Milk Source has erected, and the new dairy houses approximately 3,000 cows. Jim will get into that, or milking cows. The Milk Source partnership is comprised of Jim Ostrom, John Vosters, and Todd Willer. Along with the five large dairies, the group also owns two heifer facilities, 20,000 head in Kansas and 10,000 here in Wisconsin, Calf Source. Cow care is a top priority at Hudson Dairy. I think you'll see that today. All of the Milk Source dairies, and this is why I have the notes, are part of the National Dairy Farmers Assuring Responsible Management Program, which emphasizes the utmost care for all the animals on the farm. Milk Source was recently recognized as the 2014 Innovative Dairy Farmers of the Year by the International Dairy Foods Association and Dairy Today. They've been recipients of numerous environmental and genetic accolades, including, and they're very excited about this, the first ever red and white cow to achieve an X97 classification. The exciting for us, and one of the reasons we sponsored this was that the new Hudson Dairy features our business, the livestock water recycling manure treatment system, which takes liquid manure, concentrates and segregates nutrients for fertilizer application while producing abundant, renewable, clean, potable water. Just by a show of hands, how many people here have heard of LWR, the Livestock Water Recycling Treatment Plant? A few hands. Great, that's great. We're offering a system that's unlike, I think, any other manure processing system on the market today, and we're thrilled to have you here to hear about it. We're extremely proud of our technology and how we've been able to help farmers install and really start to focus more on milk than they have to on manure, because it is about milk production. Before we begin this tour with Jim, I'd like to thank the World Dairy Expo for the opportunity to allow us to sponsor this, and thank you for coming to the talk. And with that, I'll welcome Jim Ostrom, who's been very supportive of us, a real good guy to work with, and not any of the things that protesters might say about him. Jim Ostrom on Hudson Dairy. Please welcome him.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Milk Source. I want to talk a little bit about who we are. And we're three Wisconsin farm boys. I grew up in a farm 40 miles from here. The first farm I ever worked on had 13 cows, and the next farm I worked on had 60. And it was where I fell in love with dairy cattle and the dairy industry. And went off to Madison to this school and met John Vosters and Todd Willer, and they were each from small traditional Wisconsin dairy farms. And at one point I proposed that we form a business partnership to compete with some of the largest farms in the West. We saw growing farms in the West, and we asked ourselves, why couldn't we do it here? And there were some pioneers here in the Midwest that we really looked up to. One was the state of Michigan. We went to Michigan on a regular basis because they had freestall barns, and they were a bit ahead of the expansion curve. And then there's some dairymen in Wisconsin that we learned from. And at that time, there were very few large dairies in Wisconsin, but we all kind of grew up together. And we learned from each other, we collaborated a lot, and the business has evolved. And so John and Todd, John's on this side, and John handles all the cattle, Todd handles all the facilities, and I handle all the headaches. They would all say they get the headaches, but and that's how it works. We're truly a partnership. There's, yeah, you'll see my name out there and probably more, but it is a partnership, and we rely on each other, and it's a good team. That way we can focus on multiple things at once. We purchased John Voster's dad's farm, and they started with 30 cows in 1965. So that's our background. But in 1994, we started a partnership, and we went from 180 cows to 600. And that was probably the hardest growth that we'd ever seen in our lives. And because we knew something about cows, we knew about cropping, and we knew about some business principles, but we didn't know about human management and how to get the employee to do what we would do in all cases. And so we learned with the rest of the industry, and since then we've been growing. And we 3 years ago we looked at purchasing 3 distressed farms in Michigan. They had a very storied reputation. We got close to writing an offer, and we stopped. And we stopped because we looked at the track record of the farms, and it was, I can say it no other way, it was really awful. Their environmental track record was terrible. Their honesty or their track record with the community was not good. They had an established track record of being dishonest with the community. And finally, every vendor within 300 miles had gotten burnt. And that was a tough thing. And the farm sat on the market, and so we stopped and we backed away from the farm. And we looked at it a year later, and we finally took the step to buy these farms, and we have been remodeling them ever since. So who's from the upper Midwest here? Okay, so that means everybody else doesn't know what a real winter is, because this winter was a historic winter here. And we started remodeling these facilities in the middle of the winter, and it was a tough construction season. I'm happy to say it's over. Well, winter ended in southeastern Michigan in the middle of July, and it was rough. But I'm happy to say we're operating the farm, and we have made an investment in LWR. We made an investment on this farm because of its track record, because we want to show, first of all, we want to learn about the technology, but we also want to show the community that we're serious about protecting the environment. There are some critics of the farm, and to some extent the critics of the farm historically have been justified, and we want to demonstrate to people that we can run a clean farm on that site, and we intend to do so. And so here we are, Hudson Dairy, and I'm sorry if I'm in your way, if you happen to be in that part of the country, we'd love to have you out. We have thousands of visitors every year. We believe strongly that everybody involved in agriculture needs to tell our story. So if you're an ag and you're in production ag, I'd ask you to tell your story, and I'll tell mine, because we need people in town and our neighbors in the country to understand what agriculture is about. And I had that epiphany one day because a neighbor was kind of lamenting to me about how uncomfortable it was when our chopping equipment went into the field at 2 in the morning one summer night. And then I explained that if we didn't harvest the alfalfa at the exact right moisture level, it didn't ferment well, and if it didn't ferment well, the quality was shot for the entire year. And I apologize for chopping in around the field at his house in the middle of the night, but he got it, and he understood it. And at that moment, he felt that it wasn't just some selfishness that we were doing, it was truly something that had to be done for the benefit of the cow. And so I'd ask you to tell your story, and here's our story at Hudson Dairy. We're permitted for 3,400 cows, and we have remodeled every square inch of the farm. It is a double 50 parlor. It is a 6-row design, which means there's 3 rows of free stalls on each side. We use headlocks, drive-by feeding. And we have a RFID tag system, as many producers have, and that means that our herdsman can walk up to any cow at any time and pull up her entire life history, which is very useful for taking care of her. And our objective is always to take the best care of a cow, and it is incredibly useful for a handheld device to be able to pull up that information. We have purchased the farm, and there was some feed inventory there, and we're working through some what I would call distressed feed, a little bit older feed. And then we also have had a reasonably good cropping season, and so we'll have some new feed to blend with it. And we've just completed a commodity shed. So if you go on most of our farms, you'll see these very large commodity sheds that are contained, and we'll have 15 to 20 different feed ingredients at any one time. We'll mix the ingredients in the mixer there and deliver to the cows. We have multiple ingredients from various sources, and it's just truly to balance the ration. It is our focus. We'll run a farm with 3 or 4 different rations. And we'll drop the feed twice a day. We have installed new headlocks, in many cases new concrete, and we have put in new free stalls with sand bedding. So who here is a dairy producer? And who here beds with sand? And then a show of hands of who here hates bedding with sand but loves bedding with sand because it's great for cows. And that's really where we're at, is we hate sand, but every cow that we have, with the exception of a couple show cows, are on sand. And it is the comfort that that the sand will give the cow. It gives them traction, but it is a very big problem for equipment and maintenance. And I'll show you some slides of some equipment that we have there. And twice a week we'll come in and top off the stalls. We took out double 38 parlors that were well overused, and we put in brand new double 50 Westphalia. That's wrong. It's a Gia double 50, and that's the parallel parlor. We have plate chillers, and we drop the temperature instantly, and we can either go direct fill on the farm, so we can load semis direct, or we have bulk tanks. In Michigan, milk moves in multiple different directions on a given day. Here in Wisconsin, our milk goes from our farm to the same plant for the next 20 years. In Michigan, it could end up in 7 or 8 different places in a season. So we have to have flexibility. We milk 3 times a day, and on this farm, we do not use any BST. It's for that marketplace. If you go into any of our shops on any of the farms, you'll find they're almost identical. And this shop is one of the last things we're going to do to remodel. And it's uncanny how we try to design everything the same. We run our farms by schedule. And we found that if you do that by schedule, that details get followed. And one day, to give you an example, I was walking by a generator on a parking lot. And it turned on as I walked by, and I kind of jumped. And I said, well, it must be Wednesday at 11 o'clock, because that's when our generators cycle on. And that's exactly what time it was. And we try to operate our farms that way. And that way, we can keep everything organized and keep our employees focused on what needs to happen next. We have on-site fuel. These are keep fill, so just to give you an idea, on harvest season, we may use a semi-load of fuel in a weekend, and they'll just bring it in and put it here. So then we we scrape our manure with a skid loader, and it goes to a flume, and then it goes into our manure system. And this is where it gets interesting. And I think that's primarily why most people are here today, and why we're very excited about this project, is because we have made a substantial investment in this manure technology, and we're very enthused about what it could do for the dairy industry. So first thing is we talked about bedding with sand. Well, sand gets in all of our manure and it makes it very difficult to deal with. And what we're looking at is sand washing equipment. How many people have sand washing equipment? Show of hands. There's a few of us. It is expensive to invest in, but it does a nice job at recycling the sand. So we can just keep washing the sand and then reusing it. It works very well for the cows. And from there we go to solid separation. And solid separation, about 5 or 6% of the manure is pulled out at this process. And it's the fiber that you would see, it's like a peat moss fiber. And it keeps our product separate for our growers. So some growers may want the organic matter of the fiber, and the next grower may want the nutrient value of the liquid. This is now we're into the LWR system. Our system is not operating today, but it should be operating within 60 days. It will theoretically deliver us drinkable water. So most of the manure that goes in will go through this step-by-step process, and coming out the other end will be potable water. I have been to a couple of these facilities, and I've looked at the faucet, and the water's clear coming out the other end. I have not had the courage to drink it, though. I suppose someday I'll stand here in front of you. You didn't bring any, did you? No, that's right. I suppose someday I'll have enough courage to stand there and drink it. But I did take a whiff of it. It smells a little bit off, but it's crystal clear. That's how clean the water is. It gives us a lot of options. And the primary option is we could irrigate with it. We could use it back for cleanup. And theoretically, we could feed it back. There are cities in the United States in the Southwest that take their municipal water and they clean it up that much. And so we're pretty enthused about it. And I believe the technology is sound. In other words, I don't think it's a technology decision. The technology is there. We know that it works. It's just a matter of the economics. And is it affordable to use in dairying on a sustainable basis? Is it can you manage the variables enough to keep it operating on a daily basis? And that's what the question mark that we're intending on answering here for us. Here's a screen that will pull out some more fiber. And we have screw presses that will press out the liquid out of it. And then it goes into the reverse osmosis system. And this is a high-intensity electricity, filter system, back flushing, but this is where the drinkable water comes right out of the system. So going back to here, we're injecting some flocculants into here, just like sewage treatment, and we're separating it out, and then we're putting it through reverse osmosis. And that's what's exciting about this, and that we'll have multiple uses. The number one question I get in large-scale farming is, what are you doing with all that manure? And the answer is always, we don't have enough of it for our neighbors. And so our neighbors, our crop farmers in our neighborhoods need the manure, but it'd be nice to deliver it in a more economical fashion. And to concentrate the manure into maybe a quarter of its original volume would be very beneficial to A, the environment, B, the neighborhood, and C, the local growers. So we're pretty enthused about being able to do that. This system is a sizable investment for us, but it has a lot of potential to open up and protect the environment. So at the end of the day, we think that we will end up with a mass balance of something that looks like this. 75% clean potable water, 20 to 25% concentrated nutrients for local growers, and 5% of it would be solids. That's our goal, and that's what will, if it works to this level, will make it economical. Because now, instead of hauling hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of truckloads of manure out, or thousands of loads, we can haul a very small amount of loads on the road. If I get complaints about the size of modern large-scale dairy farming, it is, one is odor, and two is the number of trucks that pound up and down roads. And this has the potential of solving both. We don't need the big lagoon storages for the manure, so we will have a much lower odor footprint, but we also will have very few trucks going up and down the road. So it's truly a win for the neighborhood. And to us, we want to improve our license to farm. We want our social license. We want our neighbors to have some respect in what we're doing, and we want to be able to demonstrate environmental compliance, and we think that this has a lot of potential to do that. So then finally, I want to talk a little bit about innovation. We got this award. We're really honored by it. We don't think we're the most innovative dairy farm in the country. We think there are so many fellow dairymen that are extremely innovative. But we do think we're recognized for our effort. We're recognized for our investment. We're recognized for collaborations with other people on how to be more sustainable as a company. And that's our objective. And I think the biggest compliment I can give to anybody in our industry is that we've learned something from each other. And I really admire that about the dairy industry, and I think that we're probably the recipients of an award that many of you have earned because of your innovation, and we just simply have learned from so many of our peers. And I realize it's a very concise presentation, but I'd be very happy to answer any questions about this process, what got us here, and what we think the future looks like for the Hudson Dairy. Sure.
When you talked about the reverse osmosis, I got the impression that it draws a lot of energy, and just wondering how significant that is, and if you're looking at, wind or solar or something to help run that side of the sustainability.
I think that's probably the most important question that you could ask is the cost of operating it, the electricity consumption. And that is, we have the engineers' studies of what we think it's going to cost. And we think it's going to be our total cost of operation around $0.01 a gallon of manure, which we think is a net balance improvement for us because we're trucking some manure quite a distance. But what it truly costs in consumables, electricity and flocculants to do this is the question that we want to answer for sure. We have a farm, Rosendale Dairy, with a digester. We don't own the digester ourselves, but we are pretty enthused on our participation with them to operate it. I know many of my peers have digesters. We don't view ourselves as experts on it, so we don't want to own them ourselves. But the digester would be a way of producing green energy that would be a sustainable way of providing energy to run this. And if we can take 15,000 truckloads off the road by running the electricity in potentially a sustainable way, that would be our long-term goal. I have many times in my career, and this is why I'm hesitant to say we're innovative, where we've invested in something, and 4 years later we said, oh, that didn't work so well. And I have seen my peers, our peers, do the same. And I view it as this, is that we're all innovating, we're all trying to move forward, and the only way we're going to move forward is if we take steps and take chances. And this is our turn. It's all it is. It is our turn to take a chance to see if we can truly get the cost of operation low enough to make a paradigm shift environmentally. And our hope is that the investment pays off, and then perhaps the next problem that we solve in the sustainability chain is how to produce electricity to supply it. And that's kind of our objective. It might be a 5-year project.
How much is the cost per operating cost per gallon of clean water?
The operating cost is per gallon of manure. So if I look at a cow, I think she produces, the way I look at the world, is 10,000 gallons a cow. And it costs us a penny to 2 pennies to move that manure in the form of trucks and hoses and those types of things on average. And so we think it's going to cost a penny a gallon of manure to operate this system through the polymer, the labor, and the electricity. And if we can do that and lower that negative footprint that the dairy may have on a community, those trucks, the odor, I think we've really done something substantial. Yes, sorry. Go ahead.
What sort of capital cost are you looking at per cow, and is it scalable?
Yes, the system that we put in was very, very large. And it's because we looked at these farms in Michigan and we said they've got a big environmental problem. We've got to make sure we have enough capacity to handle the size of the dairies. So we overinvested. I think it's in the, Ross has got me under an NDA, so I really can't tell you what it costs. Could you have a cost per cow?
It's in the hundred. I actually don't know if it's $500 a cow.
it's $500 a cow, what Ross is saying. That is a challenge that we have. Overall, the dairy industry, if you added up everything that you own with your cows, your feed, your facilities, your equipment, your supplies and inventory, maybe some cash reserve, you might have $10,000 a cow. So if you're adding 5% of that cost to the possibility of making this more sustainable, it's a substantial investment, but I think it's still within the parameter of workable. Did you have a question? There was one over here.
It was a sign fine.
Oh, great. Okay. Yes.
What kind of permits do you need for this technology? What were the regulatory issues around it?
2 permits. One is you need a permit for anything that moves manure, and so we all have that here. And 2 is we need permits for the polymers that we use in the what I call sewage processing, a municipal processing portion of it. And the polymers are used in every municipality in the country by and large, and so those are generally reasonable to get. There's some scientific formula or some work that has to be done to substantiate what you plan on doing, but they are obtainable. It's for the flocculants.
Jim, so the water that you're producing, is that still go into what we're doing, and then we anticipate using that for irrigation or?
So the water is arguably pure and drinkable, and our intention on this farm right here today is to not do that, or not discharge it. Our intent is to use it for agricultural practices, irrigating on our crops, because the neighborhood has been misled and overpromised for decades, and we do not want to push any agenda of going to a permit, to a discharge permit. In 5 years or 10 years, when we work the bugs out of something like this, we may ultimately do that. But I think what might be the better use of the water will be keep it clean, use it for wash up, use it possibly to feed back to the cows, and just be more sustainable that way.
What have you found to be the best way to communicate to your neighbors and just the community overall? Because percentage of people on ag seem to be increasing.
Right.
People are seeming multi-generations away. They don't have an uncle at farm. So what formats have you found have been the best generation out there?
We have 2 full-time PR professionals. They are veterans at what they do. They have spent their entire career in the public relations. Up until about 6 years ago, I didn't think you need to do any public relations. I kept my head down. We kept our head down, low profile. And we went for a permit, and we had a firestorm. We had opposition, people that didn't understand us. And we said, well, I went out and talked to all the PR people I could find, and not one of them said, keep your head down and keep your mouth shut. They said, you have to go talk to them. So you have to talk to people in the industry, you have to talk to people who are your neighbors, you have to talk to people who are opinion leaders. And so I think the number one thing that we do on any community that we're in is we talk to opinion leaders. That's that 40 or 50 people that are in the Rotary clubs and the high schools and in the local politics. And that is the most effective way to communicate. We have, this week we're having thousands of people through, but mostly we have 3,000 to 5,000 people through our farms a year. And we give them hands-on tours. We show them the sustainability initiatives that we're making. We show them our animal care standards. One of the PR guys we just hired, he's a long-time veteran in the business, and he is into social media like no other. I don't know how to use my phone for anything other than a phone, but these people live with it. We all know what social media has done to our world. And I've had many of my friends and peers mention to me the level of our exposure now because he's doing it. And we're just communicating who we are. We're people who care about cows. We're people who care about the environment. And it's back to all of us have to tell our story because there's a whole lot of people outside of these walls that do not understand us. It's expensive. Having a staff person dedicated to it. If I were a smaller dairyman, I would have an engaged employee doing it. I would do it in a part-time way, but I think it's essential that we all do it. Yes?
How do you move your manure from the cow stalls to the
So the question was, how do we move the manure? And it's different on every farm. On this farm, we move it with a manure flume, a pipeline that runs manure water through it, and the manure drops into the floor, and carries away to the manure system. On one farm, because of our distance to groundwater, we put in a auger system, so we don't have to dig it as deep, and that transfers the manure very effectively. Another one, it goes into tanks, and it gets pumped over with high-velocity pumps. Sand-laden manure is a very difficult thing to pump, as many of us know, and it can be costly at times. So every system is a little bit different for the area.
Has there been any feedback from employees and from the community on the LWR concept?
Ross's question was, have we had much feedback from employees and from the neighborhood on this concept? And Ross, you're not going to like me for this, but we've kept our mouth quiet about it. And it's because the folks in Hudson, Michigan have been overpromised and overpromised and overpromised and literally abused by the predecessors that were on this farm. They were never told the truth. And what we don't want to do is come out with a system that isn't operating the way we were hoping it would and disappoint the community. So we want to get this system working and operating correctly, and then we want to engage the community and show them how it's working. Because I think that's the biggest risk, is we come with a big fancy rollout to the community, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work, or 3 years later or 2 years later we turn it off because electricity costs too much or the chemicals cost too much. So we're being very cautious about how we talk to the community. Yes? Oh, the solids, it's highly sought after. It's sold to the local neighborhood. It's back to that number one question I get, it's what are you doing with all the manure? And so if I had a light bulb moment about 15 years ago, and I asked the question, how many acres, or in many of your cases from out of the states, how many hectares are there in a 10-mile radius? And the algebra is simply 201,000 acres. And of the 201,000 acres in Hudson, Michigan, or in Wisconsin, half of that's tillable. So we're at 100,000 acres of cropland that needs nutrients. And this farm, Hudson Dairy, will provide enough nutrients for about 5% of that radius. That's it. So the crop farmers in that neighborhood either have to buy chemical fertilizer or they have to buy organic fertilizer from somebody like us. And that's the sustainability, is if they can stop importing chemical fertilizer from faraway places, and we can stop spending thousands of trucks on the road, it's a win-win for society. Less environmental risk, better agronomic practices, less compaction, less traffic on roads. Better for the neighborhood, less odor. It's truly a win, and that's why this is we're so enthusiastic about this. Yes? The manure. The question was how we store manure. We have the manure in earthen lagoons. On this farm, it's perfect clay. It's the best clay in the world. It's got a liner. We have a farm that's on pure blow sand, and we have a double liner. We have a clay liner and a concrete liner. So we'll do that for safety. But we have it in open lagoons. In some cases, we're able to put covers on. In other cases, we're not. And in this case, on 3,500 cows, that's 35 million gallons a year of manure. And if we can drop it down to a quarter of its size, that's going to be 8 or 9 million gallons versus 35 million. So we're going to actually have a smaller manure lagoon because of this long term. Yes?
Odor as a byproduct, the concentrate, is it similar to traditional, or have you lost a lot of the odor at that stage? What's the thing?
The facility I saw, I would say there's no substantial difference. But what I would call the odor footprint of the farm has dropped because now we have a quarter of the product. And we have the ability to put a cover on that quarter in an economical way. So we're pretty enthused about what that does for a neighborhood. Well, thank you very much. And if you have any questions afterward, I'd be happy to answer them. Have a good day.